Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Christensen from One Sage's View Astrology, and thank you for joining me. I'm going to be talking about Eros and Psyche through the Bridgerton series, and we're focusing on Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton and their charts as it relates to Eros and Psyche and what it can inform us about our passion for this series and especially season 3. So we're going to be diving in today on Luke Newton's chart as it relates to the premiere in New York, and that was on May, I believe, 13th. And so there's the New York premiere on May 13th, and the release will be another video, but I want to focus on just the transits of that moment and what we pick up from Luke's chart and what it can tell us about him in the moment and our connection to observing him as witness and as part of the fans of the show. And so let's jump right in. So let's go. All right, we're going to jump into Luke's chart with the transits for the red carpet event in New York, the premiere on May 13th, and look at the transits, the transiting planets of that moment and what that means for Psyche and Eros and how we are picking up on Psyche and Eros as observing this event and what we might be anticipating, because this is anticipating the release that would happen on May 16th. So in the transits of the moment, it's giving us some hints about how Luke is experiencing the energies of the moment. Okay, so that's the most important because this is in relationship to Luke and those planets in transit and the energy that is, stimulating some things going on for him on his internal plane. Also, that what we see in his external view from our observation of him. And so it's important to kind of point that out. We have yet to see the season 3 part 1. That would be 3 days in the future. And so it's important to kind of point out that this is anticipation of what's coming. Okay. But some things are real time, but some things have a kind of a vibration that will kind of play out over the days. Now, there's the moment of the premiere, which is excitement and the excitement of everyone around the premiere and all of the press and things that are done to make that press with the fashion involved and these kinds of things. So we can see the stellium of Taurus at the top of the chart with Sun and Uranus conjunct together at 23 degrees of Taurus, and very close by is Jupiter and the vertex, a very strong kind of a point, and this is also accentuating the grandness of this and how big it will be, and because the stellium just accentuates the whole thing. And then the energy is with the Venus in Taurus, her own sign, makes it that much more powerful in terms of the press it will receive, the interest that how beautiful it is, and these kinds of things. Now, Psyche in the transiting moment is sitting conjunct Luke's sun. So he is highlighted and his co-star Nicola is highlighted simply because it sits in his 7th house of other. So Psyche is kind of breathing that to life through our observation of Luke and Nicola together. And so it's lighting that up. And as I had mentioned in Nicola's chart, how the Eros and Psyche are opposite, in Luke's chart, we have the transiting Psyche kind of activating his sun, so how he is putting his mask out in the world, which also accentuates his Chiron. Chiron in Leo then pulls it back to the sun, so kind of being in the public eye. That amount of light, it's like the spotlight, and how that can feel very uncomfortable for him and how he feels about himself in that light. So he will seek out the sun that feels the most stable, which to him is Nicola. Okay, so now his natal promise for Psyche is transformation inside the depths of his self from the energy of the family energy that's very deep in his subconscious, but not just the subconscious. It's more like it's the place of family, the place of home, the place of where he would feel in his mind be, or in his life experience be the most connected to, because those are the deepest bonds. That Scorpio has the deepest bond bonding potential. But in that frame also, because of the entire stellium of Venus' own sign, Taurus, there is this kind of square, but also it's a T-square from his own planets to this igniting kind of fourth volume of planets in transit that kind of make it into a grand square. So it's kind of bringing in that charge for his public persona, of course, how he feels, the transformation. He's starting to feel more and more the transformation effect of this thing that he's involved in as part of his career, 10th house. The fashion that's involved, 10th house, that the Taurus in the 10th, very visible for him. And we have seen him do more and more with fashion. That's the Taurus, the beauty. And it's very much like in the Psyche and Eros myth, the Psyche's beauty, being so beautiful that others disregard Aphrodite and worship Psyche. Okay. So there's a little bit of the hint of the jealousy, the hint of that intensity of that potential in here. Okay. So the opposition has sometimes, oftentimes, especially when we have Uranus involved, it's breaking something open, but there's also the potential for the visible separation of something, slight separation. So this is kind of the first, I think, after party of that premiere. So that we see that potential with Antonia hugging Nicola at, I think, an after party, got caught on someone's video that they shared on social media. So that's the first hint of some kind of separation potential. But I think it's important to realize that Luke does not, from his free will, control certain things. He's just participating in them. And part of what the soul sets up. Now, it's really important to understand that the soul has the potential for setting up certain storylines that are to be experienced for the transformation. And a part of the myth of Psyche and Eros gives us that, but I'll go more into that detail later because I kind of have to pull that all together after all of this kind of exploring Psyche and Eros, so it's better understood. But Psyche in the underworld is dealing with that task that Psyche has in appeasing Aphrodite through these tasks, going into the underworld, which I tie a lot to for Luke because of Psyche being in the 4th house, Psyche being in Scorpio and next to Pluto, square his Sun, square his Saturn, square his Mercury. So this his Aquarius 7th house. There's so much that he's going to discover and uncover for himself in his own transformational journey as it pertains to the group consciousness and how powerful it is in its suggestion or potential manipulation. And he, as a soul, has to decide for himself. He is the one who has to figure out not getting caught up in that group too much, but having a partner that helps him navigate his own identity and figuring out his own path. There are going to be significant others who help him do that. That is interesting because I think in one of the very last recent videos, he talks about that in the sharing that Bridgerton did around, maybe it was Netflix, but I think it was Netflix, sharing them when they're sitting in the theater and they're looking at the big screen, which I think is also very important about them seeing themselves on the big screen, about the mirroring effect, but more on that later. But what I think he said, it was about that you're evolving something, but you don't have to do it alone. I think he said that in that interview or that sharing. And it's exactly true for him, especially. And I think that people like Nicola, who mirror him so dynamically with so many things clicking in their charts when they're come together, when they're seen together, it's important to consider that how powerful the mirror is in order to see yourself, in order to understand your own worth, your own beauty, and these kinds of things, because that's soul, Psyche, soul. Okay. And Psyche in transit is bringing in something that's also Aquarian. It's kind of figuring in it's okay that your soul has something different that might have beauty that is different or has an attraction to a beauty that is different than the status quo. So if there truly is a deeper attraction to Nicola than just friendship, then this is almost like the opening that could be there this is breaking a paradigm of maybe status quo thinking, which would be like a Capricorn. Capricorn is people, go by what the collective thinks on something, or the old paradigm. The Uranian energy, the Aquarius energy, is we're breaking that paradigm open to there can be attractions to all sorts, shapes, sizes, whatever, and there can be true, beautiful attraction and synergy, romance, and desire, deep desire. This is all about desire with that attraction. I think that's in the context of Nicola's chart and Luke's chart. Now, that might still be a big puzzle piece if that is absolutely true. I'm not saying that he absolutely has the deepest attraction that he would pick up and want to build on that into a romantic relationship and, kind of leap off from the great friendship that they have created. It might be that there would be a concern about, don't want to hurt the friendship because that's so precious. That could be true here, but it could be that this opened up so many things in being connected over that extensive time of the tour that over time that could actually percolate things. And then we see something that emerges later. That's a very strong possibility given all the things of these two and the combinations of their chart. But there's so much projection that is being managed by both Nicola and Luke that it's not surprising to me that there would be this kind of break from that show, the interest and passion for the show and what the characters were doing and what the people in their real lives would be doing. So I kind of like, my sense of humor is a little strange sometimes, but I think it's kind of funny that the first girlfriend that we see is from Greece, one of the first places that his character Colin goes to in his worldly travels. So I don't know, but that's a little bit of clowning around a bit, right? So is there a journey that he has to take, just like Colin had to take, to go find himself? More than likely. And, Nicola is older. That's also a Uranian thing, very different. Aquarian energy about a relationship that is between a younger man and an older woman. But isn't it ironic that his one song that his boy band did was about Cougar Town, and that was something that she pranked him on? It kind of gives and gives, you know what I mean? So a comfortable, idea about that. Like, yeah, that's fun and that's sexy and whatever. So that's something he sang and danced to. I just think that's kind of funny, right? So, and the fact that then the next, like his storyline, they really don't have that in the show, but we know that they're real ages. But in the show, they are supposed to be him older, her younger. But okay. I mean, the Bridgerton series, how it's written for Shondaland is definitely different than the books. It's just based on Julia Quinn's book, not exact, right? But it is interesting to see where they take it and make it different from the books and how the Psyche and Eros play out. Because, I've only listened to the one book. I don't know about the other ones, but I wanted to kind of see how the difference between the two were. And I've listened, and it's a very different, it's definitely got some interesting parts to it for romance, I guess, spicy scenes and so forth. But I think it's more, I wouldn't have necessarily picked up on the Psyche and Eros from the book at all. It's more, in terms of passion, desire, yes, but not how it is in the impact that comes through the characters played out in, through the Bridgerton series, and how much goes into that piece of art, I guess, from the series, right? Because there's so much that goes into the costume, so much goes into the hair and makeup, and then the dancing, there's so much dancing and making the modern music fit in through the orchestras of, the balls that they go to. There's so much Taurus, and of course Pisces as well, with the imagination of it. And right now we have, these two planets, Saturn and Neptune, in Pisces, and they've been getting closer. So when, Saturn entered Pisces back in March of 23. So they were still filming, probably at the very end of filming though, before they went into post-production and started doing all the CGI work. And then all the languages that it would go through. But they were filming in 22 and 23. So Saturn would have been at the end of Aquarius, and then also then jumping into Pisces. And so that kind of brings in a lot more imagination and so forth. It picks up on different things for Saturn ruled people like Luke and Nicola. Their sons are in a Saturn ruled sign. His is in Aquarius and hers is in Capricorn. So I think that's important to kind of consider that movement of Saturn from the Saturn ruled sign to Saturn in Pisces, which is very, very different flow for that planet. So I hope that explains a little bit about that. But Saturn in his 8th house is kind of loosening the place of sexuality, things that are taboo in sexuality. So that kind of moves the consciousness as there's more maybe looking at what does the partner care about? What is that shared partner experience? And where does the imagination go with that? But there's a surrendering. Pisces is such a big sign for imagination, for extreme escapism as well. But when it's in the 8th house for an individual and they are Saturn ruled, it can be also the containment of the emotions. And it's probably incredibly difficult when Neptune is so close by. There's a surrendering that's like, you do not have the power to overpower Neptune. Neptune is flooding the consciousness with so much feeling and imagination. And so just imagine what he might have in dreams, actually. And so dreams were a part of the series, right, of season 3. But imagine in real life, while he's filming, how much he wants to control his imagination to some degree so he can play the part that he's read the lines, but how he might be subtle with his facial expressions. That's how he would play off of his other co-stars, but absolutely Nicola, because that's the main other co-lead, right? So yeah, so that's all in there. So Saturn is very interesting in this. And right now, Saturn and Neptune are getting closer and closer together. Saturn has at this moment stationed retrograde. And so it's going to be moving away slightly while it's in retrograde, but then very soon Neptune's going to go into retrograde. So they'll both be in retrograde. So there's a continuation of this energy over this summer and until they station direct and then come back around to then go direct. I'll cover that more later, but there's a continuation of this Saturn in Pisces and the flooding of the consciousness with that kind of energy and wherever Jupiter is. Now, Jupiter, when it was in Taurus in May, would have been about beauty, the things of ourselves that are passion, taste, food, the eroticness of that, I guess, as a part of that. I would also say that the fashion is very important with the image that's created for beauty. So that's really kind of honed in there. And so it was absolutely in the premiere event, and it was and then in the release, the first release of part 1, because Jupiter was still in Taurus. And the bulk of their tour, and which really kind of frothed us all up into a frenzy, Jupiter and Taurus, right? Like the desire also being amplified within us for seeing beauty, seeing that connection and a love story, right? You could argue that Taurus could also be romantic, but Venus in Taurus is really about savoring those things and acknowledging those parts of us that have desire and want it to be experienced through touch, taste, smell, so these kinds of things, right? So the 5 senses. So and it's also the importance of trust. So trust is an underlying theme as well, because Taurus is about, I can trust to be in that place of exchange of love. So there's that. Scorpio would be a place where that would change up. And first side of Scorpio is it wants to merge with the thing, but it will also have a penetrating energy for that. And if it doesn't get it with one thing, it will go to another to get it. So that could be that kind of angle in there. And that's why jealousy can come out, because if it feels that it's threatened, then it will put that's kind of like that spike up of jealousy. Envy is part of the coming themes as well, but it's kind of in the part 2 more. I see more jealousy as part 1. And so I kind of see that as the dark side flipped of that in the part 1 storyline. This is kind of all in that premiere. Is that an undercurrent tone for Luke in anything that we could see in the premiere? I don't know. Maybe for Nicola, maybe for Luke, but I don't know. I mean, is there anything that we could see? I don't recall exactly, but there could be an underlying experience, a small experience of a little bit of jealousy or something like that that's in there. I'm not saying it is, but there is a possibility. If someone feels insecure about something, that could show up, right? So that's important to point out. Another thing to point out is, see, here is Pluto, and at the premiere event, it is opposite the moon. So this is accentuating. Moon in Leo is very visible, and it's in his first house, so he's very visible. You know, the reflection of the intensity of the moment is going to be seen on his face, absolutely. And it's a transformational experience with Pluto opposite that moon, and so we are kind of in the mix of that moon because of the intensity of us witnessing and him feeling that, those that were present, but also the media that comes and the technology. Because I don't know if people realize this, but the Aquarian energy can pick up, I think, in their awareness of self in the public, like almost like have the awareness of the phone is on them, a camera is on them. So there's a potential there that he feels that the proliferation of the potential of how many eyes are on him, right? So there's that. At the moment of the premiere event, the South Node is on his Jupiter as well. And then at the top of the chart, the North Node, which is informing of the importance of the instincts, the instinctual nature of being present in the moment. And that is right within his the asteroid Amor. Interesting. And his midheaven is probably somewhere between that Amor and Venus, but it could be, you know, once we have his exact birth time, it could be over in Pisces. That's a potential, but I think it's important to point out that movement of where the transiting nodes are in the moment. The South Node is highlighting his Libra Jupiter. So Libra and Jupiter is about the relationships, about he will expand through relationships. I don't know if his family were in New York or if there's a potential that maybe in the interviews he talked about his family a little bit, or he talked about his aunts and his mother. Third house is kind of the extended family, but Jupiter for him is his creative self, the things he gives birth to that could be in the future children, but this is more kind of his creative pieces that he gets involved in and jumps into. So there's a combination of his creativity and how he brings what he finds pleasure in, and he's kind of doing it very publicly, right? But it's South Node, so this Jupiter has been creative before, and this is a new spin on it. I think it's also important, but there's something from the past coming forward in the moment because the South Node is sitting right there, and it just passed his Jupiter. So there is something that within the week prior or 2 weeks prior to the New York premiere, definitely within that period of time, he had the South Node right on his Jupiter. So it may be a loss of something in the creativity or a sense of self in that, but it's kind of like it's going to be related to the fifth house of creativity. But fifth house is also Venus's house from a traditional astrology standpoint, and that's a house of pleasure. So is there something going off from something of the past, a past thing that's being presented again for him to understand about himself? Or is he repeating something that had happened before, and the soul is setting up something for him to acknowledge parts of himself? Right. So the soul, I think the higher part of ourselves, our soul, has kind of set up these things to engage in these storylines of life experiences to awaken us to something that we want to evolve about ourselves, or to kind of like, this is who you are. Do you want to be that, or do you want to change and redefine yourself? So it takes, courage and a lot of, to break out of an old pattern of sorts. Right. And that's kind of evolutionary astrology, is about when something presents itself again for you to evolve something. And it can be a very small thing, but it's major for the soul to actually choose something new. Right. So, and that Libra Jupiter is on Nicola's South Node. So something's going on there, right? So that's interesting to me. And here we have where the transiting is lighting up all that energy in the ninth house. That reminds me of the tour. That's the foreign travel, but that's also the potential to meet people when they're abroad and connections that they make. There's also, you can see that Mars within a month was on that Venus. And so that to me is important, that was happening in the tour and that people were picking up on. Okay. So there's also a little bit about the transiting Chiron, the transiting Mercury, how things can happen very quickly. That's Mercury. Mercury in Aries is kind of that instinctual nature of somebody, how they respond to something very instinctual, out of habit, and then maybe it's caught on video. It's been recorded, but it's very instinctual nature. Mars is passion. Mars is how we use our sexual energy. So Mars is in Aries, and so it's very instinctual. So at the premiere, we may have seen his use of Mars a little bit in terms of how he might have flirted and what did we see, or how he may have appeared on some of the interviews that happened and what he would talk about. And that would show the Mars being instinctual, right? And when you go back and look at those New York premiere videos, what you might see about kind of that connection, because this is kind of connecting into his own Venus and its desire nature to go get what it wants. When a Venus is in Aries in your own chart, it's a passionate Venus that goes and gets what it wants, but it has a Martian focus to it. It has a little bit more of a independent feminine, and so he's attracted to very strong, independent type of women, maybe even a little bit combative of that. He likes that, right? Like who have strong instincts themselves. Yeah. Venus in Aries from a traditional astrology perspective is not in her strength. She's not like Venus in Taurus, but we have Venus in Taurus on the transit. So that's in the moment of the premiere itself. But for Luke, in his own experience over time, I'd have to look at his progress chart, which is the chart before this. The Venus will progress into Taurus. So let me just see if I can go back there for just a second. Let's see here. Is this this is the progression. So if we look, so by progression, his Venus is at 19 Aries. So that's interesting because that's exactly the degree of the total solar eclipse that happened on April 8th. So there is some kind of fallout relative to him connecting with his own Venus in progressions. So that will have some kind of blip of a moment in his career, and also as it relates to his extended family or relationships. So there's almost like this cut point, because when eclipse happens, it's kind of like you lose the energy as it focuses on that planet, because it kind of goes in the blind spot. So there's a disconnect. It's almost like disconnect to reconnect. Okay, what we have then, right? So disconnect to reconnect, we kind of are aware of that. There was definitely some kind of synergy that was happening between Nicola and Luke during the filming of season 3, where they got together and practiced their lines and their trailers beforehand, before each day, and that kind of built their relationship stronger as friends. But did it also, they got so comfortable when they did the more sensitive, intimate scenes, did that spark something, but they suppressed it, and then they kept suppressing it because got to do the job. That's very their planet, their main rulership of their sun, of Saturn, do the job. So they're going to focus on doing the job, but that doesn't always say that something didn't happen in terms of their feelings being evoked of some sort, right? So, but if you suppress it and it's still there. So if they take time away from the show after they've finished all of these premieres and releases, and give time for the show to do its thing for season 3, you go away from the character for a little bit, but they're going to go back and film season 4. So what happens when they reconnect? That to me is kind of like, let's see what happens to where they take the storyline, or do they realize that, we were so connected to our characters, but their charts are so connected. They do have the potential for their friendship to be lifelong because of this, right? Does it turn into something else? Depends if it depends if the connection was felt to the degree that it's worth the risk to go for it. And I think I've heard Nicola kind of say that in the interviews, is just go for it. And then I think in the interviews also, when they were talking to an interviewer about, what if you saw that your friends were falling in love or were interested in each other, what they were saying about, like, Nicola was life's too short, go for it. And I think Luke's answer was something related to making sure you have good communication. So in case it doesn't work, that you still have the friendship of able to come out of it, which is an interesting scenario that they both presented, because that would show his chart about the communication and that Jupiter sitting in the house of communication. Something very much so in terms of Mercury is how we communicate. He has a fixed Mercury, but his fixed Mercury is square Pluto. It's going to transform. He has a huge transformation as it pertains to the fixed nature of what he thinks about partner, or what the partner presents to him. And then he is just participating in that. When I see the planets sitting in the seventh house, it is oftentimes that I see when I'm doing people's readings that the planet that's sitting in the seventh house, all of those planets are something that are inside him that he does not fully like realize that are completely him too, because it's just for him to pick it up from a mirror. His soul needs to see it from the other point of view for him to get it, to absorb, oh, they are me, I am them, we are the same, right? And there's something very powerful about a soul having that mirroring effect. And of course, we have all the mirrors of this storyline. The story. So Nicola and Luke, the mirrors of the show, but it's like the mirrors with us, with them as well, and us as a fan base also having the mirror, and how each person will have their own unique thing that they pick up on. I've gotten a few of people having interest for different things about these individuals. Some for Luke, but mostly them together. They want to see them together. I really want to know, are they going to be together, or is Nicola, going to get pregnant or something? It's like, okay, these are way out there. It's a desire that they have that goes beyond, and it's picking up something in their own consciousness that they have a desire for. The individual wants it, so they're projecting it out. So if you have something that you've desired for these two people to express, think about how that is actually pointed back at you and is actually awakening something up for you. So a way to get into that is, why do I even think that? Why does that like really get me excited? Why do I want to see that? Right? Because that's your participation with it. So you have to get curious. You have to ask questions. My questions have been about Psyche and Eros. I want to know more about Psyche and Eros and why this amount of energy desired to be expressed across this collective, population of people interested in this, and the way we stream it, and Psyche and Eros being so potent. It's so potent. I can see it everywhere. And it's like, that's what drew me in, is like, wow, this is so fascinating how much the Psyche and Eros is picking up. I mean, it's one thing to just do the storyline. It's like, yeah, that's great. But the volume that it gets picked up in, and the desire nature that is being projected back onto Lick and Nicola from everybody, or that people may be taking into their own relationships. So they don't necessarily project, some people don't necessarily project it onto the two actors after the fact, but they project it in their own relationships. Meaning, if they have a partner, they're projecting their desires, and how is that part of their soul awakening to itself about its authentic self. The soul has a journey that it's, looking at for its time in a body, right? It's like because of all the five senses and understanding things from that experience. I hope that makes sense. Psyche and Eros gives us awareness through the myth about the different kind of things that we might go through to understand a union of ourself with our desire nature. So there's that. Okay. So I've covered quite a bit. I have no idea how long this is at this point because I can't see a timer, but I also want to cover Eros in the moment of the New York premiere, and it is in his 12th house. So by transit, it's in 0 Cancer, but it's sitting connected and it's applying to his own Juno. And I believe Juno was a part of Nicola's, the transiting with the moon with her. And so I think it's important to kind of point out that this is in his emotional 12th house, which is related to his moon and his expression of how we see his emotions. Now, of course, we don't have an exact time for Luke. So his moon could be a different degree than 27 of Cancer. If it was later, it could be in Leo, but I don't think as soon as you move the chart to have an ascendant that's later, it could even be a deeper sign. So yeah, I'd have to go explore that, but there is a potential that it could be a different sign. Okay. But because of the emotional intensity that he displays, I think that comes through his Scorpio to the moon in a water sign underneath it all. And it has to be close to the ascendant to show up on the face. And that to me is important. So there's a potential there. I'm not saying that's concrete, but that's a potential. The midheaven of the event at 28 Cancer kind of makes me wonder about that being true for Luke, that the emotional intensity that shows up in his face during the coming season, or the coming season 3, but also when he's at the premiere, because this is of course the New York event, and the midheaven shows the emotions that are on his face. And I know that he had that definitely in the New York premiere. So hopefully that's good for understanding the intensity of emotion. But we have the combination of the midheaven of the event which is when anything's on the midheaven, it's very visible to the public. And so when it's the midheaven and the moon right next to it, it's very visible, and it's Leo. So the Leo moon is just picking up and really kind of spotlighting it, like having a spotlight on it. The moon in Leo is to be adored, and it's very visible. It's all the beauty, very king-like. Yeah. And it looks to be accepted by the group for that as well, be seen for that as well. So yeah, that's important. And I think what's also fascinating is his moon, that transiting moon at the moment is trine to his own Venus. So it brings in that quality of the beauty again, and the desire, the feminine part of himself, and his female counterparts that have been very much participating in the tour, which is Nicola and others in his life. Okay. Yeah. So that does that. That also has that transformational effect, because 28 Cancer, even though it's out of sign to say, it's 28 Cancer, and Pluto on the opposite is in a different sign. So it might not feel like by sign it's opposite, but by degree, that Pluto is absolutely opposite that midheaven. So it's really transformational for the show. So that to me is pretty significant about how much will be transpiring in relationship to the event, how it will go, and also how the show will have incredible numbers in viewership. That's very transformational. So it's already done incredible things from when it first premiered in 2020, in December, on Christmas Day in 2020. That really blew up extraordinary for Netflix. But I think in each season they have, different astrological charts, but this Pluto is transforming that again. So there's another transformation point happening for Netflix itself, maybe what they might expect, but people who are viewing it and their opinion of it, because there is some critical stuff that happened during the show, part 1, part 2, that people expressed their expectation for certain storylines and things like that. So that has a transformational effect going on here, right? So there is a collective transformation going on with these archetypes in these storylines. So the next one, season 4, we're not exactly sure who it is, but I think it is the storyline for Benedict, I think, but I don't know for sure. I'll have to go back and look if they've announced that. I don't know. Anyway, because they kind of left it hanging one or the other at the very end of part 2. What else do I want to point out? Let's see here. Yeah, there's some unexpected things that transform our view of how Luke and Nicola as co-stars also are going to go through another transformation. So they go through a transformation in the show, but we're also seeing a transformation in their own lives. So it's kind of that life imitates art and art imitates life thing going on. Now that I'm recording this, it's July 1. By the time this is done, edited, it could take a couple of days, but they're moved on to the next project, or there'll probably be some time in the next few months getting into season 4 filming, or getting the scripts at least to learn for season 4 for their parts. So I think that's important to take into consideration. It's kind of an ongoing thing. There's this kind of building of archetypal. I think the season 3 and Luke and his transformation has like multiple steps to it. I think it mimics his character arc of Bridgerton. So what Colin went through season 1, season 2, season 3, we may witness for Luke also similar kind of arcing steps that he takes in his life. Psyche and Eros is a part of that, his own soul and his desires, and what that looks like in how it takes shape. But the New York premiere definitely picked up a lot of the chart's synastry between him and Nicola, but his expression of what his own son, his own connection with Nicola would display the same storyline of Psyche and Eros. But Eros in the 12th house is actually pinpointing some things for him emotionally that he seeks in a real partner. And so that is in there. That Eros is right on Juno. So there's some kind of desire that is pointed towards what he would probably look for in a real, true, significant other relationship. But it's a part of his unconscious mind. He'd have to kind of go through quite the journey to discover what that really is for him emotionally. So an Aquarian individual that has several planets in Aquarius, a few planets that are transpersonal in Capricorn, very Saturnian in like what they kind of get back from their journey from others, but there is in the consciousness like trying to figure out what about these emotions, like where are they coming from, what are mine, where are they coming from, and they get evoked through his acting. But there's more to it than that, because we all can pull on storylines that evoke certain emotions for us to call them forward if we were acting. But there's also discovering, he had a failed relationship in 23, a very long-term relationship. 4 years is a decent amount of time within a relationship, and I'm sure there were things that he was trying to figure out as a part of that timeline, maybe right before and still going through as he set off on the world tour. Yeah. And definitely by the time that he gets to the New York premiere event, he's already showing up with a new girlfriend, as far as we know, not announced by him, but appears to be. And there were some snapshots done on the social media and then removed that I think clicked maybe on April 7th. So if they clicked for the first time, Luke and Antonia, in early April, they also have the moment of the cutoff coming inside that relationship as it pertains to the Venus. Okay. There's definitely an energy on, energy off as it pertains to his own Venus, and the moment of the total solar eclipse with his progressed Venus at 19 of Aries. I don't know what that exactly is. I just know that that's what the energy does. It kind of brings you a surprise and it brings you unexpected things that kind of like stop. It kind of clicks it off and then clicks it back on. It's like the VCR back in the day. We had VCRs. The reset button, right? Yeah. So again, we don't have his exact midheaven. I don't know if his midheaven is further into Aries. That's a possibility, and how that has that hitch up with that. But even so, it's in his 9th house. So in his house of travel, or if he has a relationship with someone from a foreign place, that also brings in that kind of potential. Yeah. I don't know when that relationship would have began exactly. I know it looks like it was in the friend group, but that doesn't mean it turned on then. It could have been just friends. I don't know. It's just like, potentials, right? But definitely seeing that more through other clips in the last month or so since that red carpet event, kind of behind the scenes, but definitely in London. We'll talk about that one at the next video. But I hope that helps kind of explore Luke's chart, kind of what gets activated. His ascendant gets activated by the moon, probably somewhere in there. I think my hunch is his ascendant is somewhere in those first few degrees. So the midheaven of the event and the moon of the event of the New York premiere are getting lit up. You have opposite Pluto making a transformation of themselves. So transformation for Nicola, transformation for Luke in a very big way, which indeed is the case. As soon as we started streaming season 3, we would have this pickup of even more excitement. And just, it's like the seeding and the fertilization of Psyche and Eros in our own consciousness as we get into that storyline from the imagery that was in the show, and then also what we were kind of seeing through the clips from the tour that continued after this premiere, okay, in different cities like Toronto, like Brazil. Brazil was May 19th and 20th when they were Sao Paulo. So there was this event. So that is really interesting. Yeah. And what other events were near there? Toronto was later. Yeah. No, Toronto was in early June. Yeah. And Galway was early June. Yeah, so they came after the New York premiere. Yeah, so there's several parts of the tour that were after the New York premiere, and we can see how their relationship through just those interviews, when they're a little bit more relaxed, reveal a little bit more about just how they engage with each other. Again, at the same time, there is potential, absolutely, there's a girlfriend situation in the background, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some other kind of thing still unlocking in their consciousness when they spend time together, even as friends. And then what that stimulates and activates in all of us observing it. So hopefully that makes some sense about the New York premiere and how it's almost kind of like the beginning right before the release. And once the release hits, and we'll see that in the next video, how then it shifts slightly because we still have this stellium in the release on May 16th. So that's going to be our next video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for the time. And you're welcome to follow me on One Sage's View, both on Instagram, or check me out on my website at onesagesview.com if you're interested in having a reading or exploring Eros and Psyche in your own chart. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.